Welcome back to my channel. Do you know that 2020 is going to be a critical year for climate change? Do you know the reason why? How it is going to change our world? Are we going to live a difficult world for our kids to live in? Watch till the end of the video to know the reason why. And stay tuned and let's start with my point of view. Before we start, can I ask the new viewers to click on the subscribe button below and become part of the community? We must have heard about climate change. We must have taken some action some point of time. We must have thought about it. We must have seen in movies. We must have seen documentaries on that. You know, very few of us would have taken any action on that. Majority of us are actually looking to the government policy, and also institutions are going to do something about it, right? Or maybe some technological miracle is going to happen, which is suddenly that will make us safe. Or by the time, you know, the mankind is about to become extinct, we will have some kind of a spacecraft, a Noah's Ark kind of thing, that we can travel out of Earth and we can stay in some other planet like Mars, Venus, or we'll just simply go to the moon and live by. It's not that simple, my friend. There is a perception also now. During this COVID times, people think that there is less of activity, there are less of vehicles on the road, so the climate has improved. But that is a weather that you're talking about, my friend. Now, the climate change, even though the temperature, the so-called the pollution level, the air pollution level might have come down, but overall, when you talk about a climate change, the mistakes that humanity has done for so many years, that will not go away just like this. Now, let's be responsible, more responsible than before. Let's make this into a movement. And let's today talk about why 2020 is a critical year. I'm going to talk about why that is and what are the developments which are happening around it. So let's go to the next section. If we could stop global warming altogether, but you cannot do that. It's not practical. Why it's not practical? It's not practical because mankind has a certain ways of living, the way our economy is going. We do certain things, we commute in a certain way, we live our life in a certain way. If we have to do and stop everything and change it just to suit ourselves and just to make and ensure that the emissions are stopped, then it's going to be an abrupt change in the history of humanity. It's going to stop global warming, but it's going to have a lot of repercussions, which is not practical. And that's the reason why we're doing it in a very gradual way. Now, the next target is by 2030, the warming which is happening, at least we can decrease the speed of it. So the target, after the report came out a few years back, the target is to not let it warm by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. So basically, in other words, we're saying that the global warming should not be more than 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030. There's the target. So even this thing, you say, oh, 1.5 degrees Celsius is quite less. What does that mean? Why not 3%? Why not 1%? My dear friend, by the end of the century, by the end of this 21st century, if things go like this and it reaches 3%, you don't even know what's going to happen. We cannot even imagine the magnitude of it. The earth that we see today would be unrecognizable by then. This itself would require a lot of effort. It's a woefing effort in terms of not just from the economy, not just from the government side, not just for the policymakers, not just for the institutions, the research organizations, but also it would require a genuine movement from all of us. And in today's video, that's what we are trying to put the message across, and also going to tell you why 2020 is such a critical and an important year. Also, before we talk about 2020, the critical year, let me tell you that this target of keeping the global warming contained below 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030 is a hard deadline. You will say, what is a hard deadline? Now, a deadline can be a hard or soft. A hard deadline simply means that if you miss that target, you're going to see a catastrophic result. It will be a failure for humanity, for the mankind, because the result after that, if it's more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, is going to be really, really bad. We'll talk about some of those impacts later on in the video. Keep watching, but let's talk about and why 2020 is a critical year. After the United Nations climate report came out a few years ago, and all the experts, they were really worked up, and they were looking, initially they had a target of 2030, but later on they considered 2020 to be an equally critical year. When we all are working from home and we are staying low and we're letting the COVID subside, we're looking for these vaccines, our effort, the main effort towards the climate change has gone down. It has gone down, especially with a lot of politics also around it, on the economic trade, contraction of the economy. Nobody's talking about climate change anymore. But without this, undeniably, let me tell you, climate change doesn't stop, because you are stopping if you're not making this a focus, if policymakers are not talking about it, and if it's not been considered because the economy is contracting, climate change is not stopping, my friend. Now, 2020 is important because if you have to make a difference by 2030, 2020 is the year by which all the policies should be finalized, and all the requirements should be done in terms of the planning and execution, so that the coming 10 years we just focus on working towards and executing the plan so that we are able to achieve it. So all the countries would be meeting this year, and they're going to discuss what they have done so far, what they could do to actually meet this target. So that is the critical year for evaluating, assessing, and actually planning the execution, which will make possible the achievement of this target. Talking about some of the top impacts, it's going to impact everything that you cannot even think of, you cannot even imagine. It's going to have the domino and the multiplier effect of a magnitude which is unthinkable at this point of time. If it goes unabated and it just carries on and we don't meet our targets, it is going to be very bad for humanity and the mankind. Earth is the only planet that we have where we prosper. If we don't meet the target, we've been already hearing about the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the lot of the wild jungle fires. There's so many things happening. Those are the things that will increase. Now, oceans, they absorb 90% of the heat. Now they are going to get more and more aggressive in terms of a lot of hurricanes going to come. The environment within the oceans are going to change. The flora and fauna that you see within the ocean, in the seas, that's going to change. You may see slowly the coral reefs would be disappearing. You will see the life in the ocean and the sea that's sustained, would see a huge change, and many of that change would be towards a negative side of it, that will be destroyed. Now, very close to us, very close to our heart and to our mind, we all are thinking about COVID. Oh, pandemic, though so many people are infected, there is no stopping. We're looking for vaccines. With the global warming, new viruses would come into play that we haven't heard of. And the pandemics would be a general thing. We are shaken by just one pandemic. imagine when this pandemics would become customary, it will just keep on happening one after another. You don't want to leave such a world for your kids to live in, right? Now, its impact on soil will also be very bad. The quality of soil will degrade. So the crops which are grown on that soil will actually give out less and less of nutrients. If the vegetation which is grown is not nutritious enough, how it's going to impact the entire animal kingdom? Let's take another example. Deserts. There was a point of time when Sahara is one of the largest desert in the world in North Africa. It used to be a tiny one. Today it covers most of North Africa. The desertification would grow. Also, one of the impact that we have constantly heard is that the ice caps will melt, the glaciers will melt. Let's think about a scenario. Now closer home, let's take the case of India. Now, what if the river Ganges dries up because the glacier itself is no more? Can you imagine North India, a life in North India without Ganges? People will migrate, not only just from where they are, but it's going to make a complete change in the culture. You don't know the domino effect. We cannot imagine what's going to happen if these things goes like that and becomes. Now, the objective of this video is not to frighten you, but definitely to steer you so that you take some concrete example, that you understand the impact of it, that you take some concrete action towards it. So let's start with my point of view. Now, in my point of view, I generally look out for solutions where actually we can contribute. We don't talk about solutions where we say, okay, this person should do this, this government should do, that person will do, blah, blah, blah. What we ourselves can do, what we as an individual can contribute, that's what we're trying to talk. So for climate change, the top 3 or 4 things that we can do are, the first one is save money by saving energy. So it's a win-win situation. Now, when I say save money by saving energy, actually it's going to help climate if we actually conserve the energy. When we travel, just try to use more of the public transport so that we burn less of fossil fuels. If you switch on your heating equipment using electricity, if you do it less, that's going to help. So small steps, being wise, being able to preserve, all the things are going to make a lot of difference. Number 2, this is something we are more familiar with, how actually we all can contribute as an individual to lessen the pollution. So, whether it's the less use of plastics, whether you don't waste your food, you minimize the wastage, you use greener ways of doing things, your ways of living is more based on greener things, that's going to be really, really good and helpful for the climate. So even if you own a car or automobile, if it's possible, if you can switch over to a greener version, that's going to something which is going to help. When you even use more of solar panels, that's going to help a lot. Let's go to item number 3. You'd be amazed. The third thing that you can do is actually make people more aware of this and ensure that you are also participating in some of the greener initiatives. Now, making people aware, sensitizing them on the climate issue, and take concrete steps. If there are organizations which are working towards it, they organize something which is for the greener planet. Do contribute, take part. That's very, very important, because this is such a point of time where just our individual contributions cannot help. If we just wait for the governments to act upon it, it's not going to help. We just want some technology thing to come into play and just change overnight. That's not going to happen. So we ourselves have to turn this into a movement, into a revolution, so that we can save our planet and we can save a better world for our kids. Thank you for watching so far. Stay safe.